hello, good morning, and good afternoon to in-house counsel and in-house legal professionals from all across North America and the world. Welcome to In-House Connect. My name is Shai Mahani. I'm the CEO and co-founder of In-House Connect, and I'm thrilled to have you here with us today. Thank you for spending your breakfast time or your lunch time with us, and special thanks to our wonderful sponsor, Bonterms, and our fantastic presenters today, Todd Smithline, Stacey and Arne Bleeker, who are going to teach us how to go from days to minutes, how in-house teams are using standard agreements to shrink negotiation cycles. I won't steal Todd's thunder. I'm curious if this is the first IHC webinar you're tuning into, or if you've tuned into others. Let's get to today's program, From Days to Minutes, how in-house teams are using standard agreements to shrink negotiation cycles. Again, we're joined by Todd Smithline, Stacey Shaw, and Arne Bleeker, and I'll turn things over to our MC extraordinaire, Todd, to get us started.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us. And Stacey and Arna, thank you for joining as well this morning. I'm gonna do a brief introduction to Bonterms, and then I'll invite in my guests, and we'll have a good chat together, everyone, and hope to see your questions and comments in the chat box. So Bonterms solves contracts for procurement and sales while keeping legal happy. That's Bonterms' role in the world, and that's what we do. So today, what are we going to do? I'm going to introduce you to Bonterms, our standard agreements, and our Bonterms platform. We're going to preview some new playbooks that we just released this morning. We'll share best practices for adoption of the standard agreements. We'll give you a quick look at the Bonterms platform in a demo, and then we'll answer your questions. I have two very special guests today. Joining me is Arne Bleeker, Vice President of Legal with Aviatrix, and Stacey Shaw, who's the AGC at Careington. Both Arne and Stacey are Bonterms standard agreement users. They're both members of the Bonterms Standard Agreements Committee that drafts and vets these agreements, and they're both customers and users of the Bonterms platform. Stacey and Arne, thank you both for joining this morning, and we're glad you're here with us. Bonterms is a culmination of a career that I've had working in contracts for really many of the best companies in tech. I started at a law firm. I've been a enterprise software company, startup counsel and general counsel, and I've had the good fortune of representing really some of the very best companies in the enterprise tech world, helping them design, draft, and implement their contracts with their customers, their partners, and their channel. And we've taken that knowledge, and that's what we're doing now at Bonterms. I also teach at Berkeley Law School. With me on this adventure is Patrick Mullen, who you'll hopefully see pop up later in the demo. Patrick is across everything we do at Bonterms. And if you've become involved with us in any way, I'm sure you've met him. So what are standard agreements? What am I talking about? Standard agreements are a system of contracting in which you start with a complete agreement that is neutral between the parties, that is designed to be industry standard, and in our case, vetted by a 100-lawyer committee, and that you implement by a cover page. So again, it's a complete agreement designed, and you'll see the scope of what these cover in a minute, to be used between two sophisticated parties to meet each of their needs out of the box and to be easy for them to customize and implement on a cover page. One of the things we always like to make clear about Bonterms standard agreements is that they are completely free to use, both in terms of your money and your data. So everything we're going to talk about with Bonterms standard agreements today is available for you on the Bonterms website, and you can go there right now and download all of these agreements and all of these playbooks. So how do standard agreements work? There's the agreement itself, which does not change. You do not redline it to implement it. You implement it on what we call a cover page. And a cover page is exactly what it sounds like. It's a document that the parties sign to implement the standard agreement. We set forth what we call key terms and additional terms. We attach or link to the standard, and you're free to create any version of this cover page that you like. So again, the standard agreement doesn't change. The cover page is what you use to enter into the standard with your counterparty. And there are two parts to the cover page. They're what we call key terms. These are terms that the parties must agree to enter into the standard. They'll be defined in bold and in blue in the standard itself. And then additional terms. These are optional, but these are any other changes either party wants to make to the standard in order to implement it for their transactions. And we give you plenty of playbook examples of how to do that. So the Bonterms standard agreement system is a complete enterprise contracting system. It starts with our NDA, We then have a SaaS agreement, which we call cloud terms. And attached to that, we have an SLA or service level agreement and BAA standard agreement that you can use. We have a PSA, a professional services agreement, a DPA for transfer of data. And then we have two agreements that are used in slightly different contexts, a marketplace transactions agreement, which is a standard end user agreement for SaaS marketplaces, and a version of the Bonterms cloud terms that you can use to post on your website as product terms of service. And those are called our online cloud terms. We continually publish new agreements every year and expand our playbooks and the reach of our system. Okay, a couple fun facts about adoption and use of the Bonterms standard agreements. We just crossed 97,000 access events for these, meaning that these standard agreements just from bonterms.com alone have now been accessed or downloaded close to 100,000 times. You can also get them from GitHub and other places and other platforms. That's 125% year over year increase in interest in using these agreements. We've got 110 lawyers now on the committee that drafts and validates these. That committee was 35 lawyers when we started. So it's really grown in terms of the depth of its expertise and the types of companies participating. We have basically the entire tech stack from Anthropic to Zapier and back, with both Facebook and Google participating. We have F500 customers. We were the first standard agreement to market. We released in July of 21 with our NDA, and we've been simply building out the system ever since. Which standards are most popular? We get this question all the time. So this is a look behind the numbers at what people are coming in to access on our website. So it turns out the agreements that people are most interested in are the agreements for the complex commercial transactions. So 80% of the downloads on the Bonterms website are for either the SaaS agreement, our AI terms, our professional services agreement, or our DPA, and 20% are for the NDA. So what the market is telling us is that they want these complicated agreements to be solved through standards, and that's clear from the numbers here. We are very proud of the fact that we have two large distribution partners for these. The first is Atlassian Marketplace. So Bonterms is the standard agreement in the Atlassian Marketplace. And the second is DocuSign, who we've partnered with for a series of ESG standard agreements. As I mentioned, the first one we just released. I'm going to show you where you can find these now. They're all available on the Bonterms website. So this is bonterms.com. You just click on the standard agreements tab, and everything I've just talked about, you're free to access and download: the NDA, the SaaS agreement, the AI clauses, our service level agreement, the BAA, the DPA, the PSA. If it's got 3 letters, we have you covered. And then those specialty agreements, the online cloud terms and the marketplace terms. They're all here. They're all available for you to read or download. I will note that for the standards themselves, if you look at the SaaS agreement, you can view it in HTML, you can download it in PDF, but you cannot download this document in Word because it is a standard. You don't redline it. However, all the playbooks and resources and other materials we make available, you can download in various different formats, including Word. So again, everything is here on the website, free for you to access, free for you to download, and we don't even ask for email address. The Bonterms Platform is the next step of Bonterms. This is a two-sided platform that makes it very easy to quickly agree and negotiate on these agreements. And we start the parties together on the neutral platform. We have them negotiate the standard agreement, and we give them collaborative features and tools, auto-accept alternatives, and standard playbooks in order to get that done. Average negotiation times on the Bonterms Platform are about 5 minutes for an NDA or 18 minutes for the more complicated agreements. And that compares to anywhere from your own numbers at your own company, but on average about 7 to 10 days for an NDA in the enterprise and about 3 months for a more complicated agreement. So the platform is extremely fast in terms of getting these done. And there are 2 ways to deploy Bonterms. One is, as I said, on cover pages that you download yourself, that you create, you send in Word or by email. Allows you to leverage all your existing systems. It's a great way to use Bonterms. And then there's the Bonterms Platform that's separate, that we make available to you. You subscribe to the platform. The way the platform works, quite simply, is you send out an invite to your recipient, you bring them to the platform, you negotiate with them on the platform, and it gets you to agreement very fast. Okay, that's the introduction for Bonterms. And before we go to the new playbooks, let me please bring back Stacey and Arna just to say hello. Thank you for letting me get that quick explanation, and would love for each of you just to share a little bit about your experience with Bonterms just at the opening here before we dig into the playbooks. Stacey, maybe we could start with you. I should share with everybody that Stacey is known as Bonterms #1 for us, which is a position she earned a couple years ago and will never change. One of the earliest adopters of the standards and one of the first pilot users of the Bonterms platform. Stacey, welcome. And you've told me that I can share that as of today, your company Careington has sent out 300 mostly NDAs, but also I think some cloud and PSAs or BAs in there as well, using the Bonterms platform. Stacey, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you again for inviting me, and thanks to everyone for being here, and really just grateful that you're open to hearing about standards. I know some change can be hard, but changing the way the company's commercial contract is what Bonterms, that's their #1 goal, and it's something that I have been pushing for every day since I had the opportunity to meet Todd and Patrick and the amazing team there at Bonterms. So just to start off is that being open to it and being excited about it is going to help get the adoption too. Because if you just if you bring the excitement and the passion and the change, your team will get on board. It's challenging. I know we'll probably talk about that later, but I think it's great that you're here. That's step one. I know it can be scary sometimes trying something new and the resistance, but I have had a lot of success with Bonterms and worked through some challenges that we'll talk through later. But overall, I am so happy that I reached out, was looking for a solution. I was tired of I see the poll here where people are saying mostly it looks like 1 to 5 days. It's exactly when I first started, it was days of back and forth red lines of NDAs. And I thought I want to focus on these complicated agreements and spend my time instead of redlining. And I have seen the change, and it allows our sales team and every other department to get what they want to do done faster.
That's awesome, Stacey. And yeah, we love having you on the platform. We're glad for all the success you had. We're going to dig in. You've become a master at making it work at scale. So we'll dig into how you do that in a minute. But Arna, welcome. Just wanted to get some initial thoughts on what interested you in standards in the first place. And I think we're creeping up on, 85 deals you guys have sent out. And in your case, a mix of the PSA and the NDA. How's it going for you guys? And what's your experience been?
Excellent. Yeah, following Bonterms #1, but I'll give it a shot. Often the sort of the best ideas and the best products are a combination of simple to use and in retrospect blindingly obvious, right? In terms of they solve a problem and everyone thinks, why has no one ever done this before? And this is for us a combination of those two. The reason being, I think every year the theme for probably every legal department from top down from finance, and this year we're going to ask you to do more with a little less, right? So there's always, please try and be as efficient as possible and try to be as streamlined as possible, which usually means you're just going to have to put in more hours, or at least that's what it used to mean. And that's the way to run a lean and efficient legal department. And then at the same time, you see that volume goes up. Volume of contracts just goes up. Couple that with the fact that there is, I think, a general consensus on many of the content in most contracts, like NDA, like standard agreements. So you have those two things, the constant push to be efficient from the business, plus the fact that most NDAs and most PSAs and all these contracts that you read usually come down to the same thing. That makes using Bonterms really a no-brainer. It's not something you really, well, at least not something we found a very difficult sell internally, because it helps you achieve those two goals, which everyone in the business will like as well. So that's been our experience. And we can talk a little bit more about how the platform works and how the agreement works, because obviously the solution has to work, but the sort of solving that problem that I think everyone will face, I think that is just where you've hit the nail on the head.
I love this. So we hear this all the time at Bonterms when we demo the platform or when people use the platform for the first time. We always hear two things. They tell us, oh yeah, I thought of this. And then they tell us, why hasn't this always been this way? And so it is one of those things I really like how you said, blindingly obvious. The key to what makes Bonterms works is the fact that people trust the standard. And so I want to take a few minutes now to talk about the standards themselves and very quickly show you some new playbooks we just released. So the way the agreements work, I'm going to show you the professional services agreement. We've been talking about the NDA and the SaaS agreement a bit. So let's anchor on the PSA. The way the Bonterms system works is that the agreement itself does not change, but the agreement is designed to work for both a Fortune 500 or Global 2000 customer on one side and a sophisticated enterprise vendor on the other. And we do have very large Fortune 500 companies, frankly, the largest, who have contracted on Bonterms across all the different agreement types. So the way the system works is each party reviews the agreement to understand what will work for them in the agreement or anything they want to change. And then the changes are made, as we've said, on a cover page. And the cover page simply gives the parties the ability to list the changes they want to make in what we call additional terms. They can obviously also add their attachments, and they define some key terms that the agreement is designed to require the parties to define in order for this to work. Is the additional terms, changes people want to make. So we publish playbooks to make it very easy for you, if you're interested in adopting the Bonterms system, to make any changes you want to make to the standard. What you're looking at now are the playbooks we just released this morning. So this is the PSA playbook. And it's basically, people always ask me, Todd, what do people want to change in the agreements? Take a look at the playbooks, because this is where the playbooks come from, what people change. That's the playbook for the PSA. If we look at the playbook for the cloud terms, you're going to see the same thing. A series of changes that people might want to make substantively to the agreement. Now, if you're working on Bonterms, what we call analog or on paper with covered pages, you simply cut and paste this language over into your cover page, edit it as you see fit, and you're off to the races. On the Bonterms platform, the playbooks are built into the system and you just drag and drop them over. But that's how the playbooks work. I don't really have time to dig into the substance of the playbooks, but they're available for you to download and review. And it's basically a list of things people might want to change to the standard. For example, they may want to change the payment period. Here we show an example of 45 days, but of course, that could be any number of days people want, 60, 90 days. Or if you want to introduce a price cap, or if you want to have no auto renewal for the subscriptions, whatever change you want to make, we've got an example here. It's very easy to drag and drop these over. I would say on the average NDA, the ones that go through on our platform, 95% of the NDAs go through in one pass, which means no changes are being made, or the changes are being made using our collaborative features, auto accept, in one pass. On the SaaS agreement and the PSA, for larger companies, we will typically see anywhere from 8 to 15 changes that are being made on a cover page, and you can guess what those would be. In fact, if you look at our SaaS agreement, if you look at our new playbooks we just released, the types of things you might see a customer want to change, they may want to change how the enhanced cap for data breach works. In the Bonterms cloud terms, it's 3x. They might add the notion of the greater of X million, or 3 or 5x. Or they may want to expand what the provider's indemnifying them for. Or the customer may want to expand what the provider may want to expand what the customer's indemnifying them for. In any event, we show you exactly how to make all those changes. So NDA, we see very few changes. Cloud terms, which is our SaaS agreement, it's typically 8 to 10. And frankly, the PSA, the professional services agreement, which is one of our other most widely used agreements, fewer, just a few, typically just a handful in our experience. I want to note on the playbooks that these are all downloadable from our website. You can access them right here. You just click the word icon and you'll get a straight download. And that's true of all these resources as well. Let's talk about how you persuade your counterparty to join you in this new form of contracting, to start from a standard instead of the way we do it now, which is each party sending their own form to the other side and having an argument about it. So there's 3 sort of parts to this. How do I get buy-in internally within my organization? And Bonterms solves a problem for procurement and sales, but legal is always in the middle of that. So if you're Bonterms, we always end up talking to the legal department plus procurement, or the legal department plus sales when we have a new user of either the standards or the platform, or sometimes both. Arna, maybe I'll start with you. How did you guys think about adopting Bonterms? And let's just talk about internal buy-in first before we get to how you deal with the counterparties. But any thoughts on internal buy-in first, and then Stacey, I'll come to you in a second.
Yeah, I agree with the first bullet point, which is start small, right? If you present and say, we're going to throw away all our standards and go with this company called Bonterms, and they're going to, but we started with the NDA and then the PSA and DPA. There's the obvious argument about if you present Bonterms and what it does internally and tell people this will make your life easier, most people are already on board. There's also the argument that when you have your own standard contracts, you need to make sure those standard contracts are up to date. That usually takes money because you need to keep up with legislation and probably have outside counsel review your standards. This means you're always looking at peer-reviewed, solid contracts is another way to sell it. So start small, explain the ROI of what it costs to use the standard agreements and the platform, and then just see the success come in to expand, right? And we can talk a little bit about the results we've had that have been very good. And that's really what drives the further integration into Bonterms once you've started that ball rolling, got that ball rolling.
Arna, thank you very much. Stacey, I'm just going to give a little context here because you found us very early, I think, at ACC, and the members of your legal team are wonderful. But at the beginning, and I don't want to talk out of school here, let's just say it wasn't 100% thinking that this was going to work. So how did you navigate that as somebody who understood what we were doing and wanted to give this a try, and it has now become very successful?
Yeah, I think it was really just a question and not sure that it would work because I think you and I talk about this all the time is that sometimes you feel like you don't have any leverage. I have to give our team credit for being open to it and saying, look, what's it going to hurt? Like you say, start small with an NDA. It couldn't hurt to offer it. And as long as you're not rigid and say, this is the only way, we know that you just have to prepare for all kinds of potential options. But I think if you introduce it in a way that's, look, let's try it and see how it works. And we had such great success and we use it across all departments, not just sales, but for sales, it equaled revenue because the sooner they could get out their pricing, if they could do their NDAs much faster than historically having to download a Word template from a network shared drive, fill it out, send it emails back and forth, red lines, then figuring out how to sign it. When you convert that to now all I have to do is fill out 3 pieces of information, press send, how could they say no? Right? It was a very easy sell. I did a lot of internal training. Also, our team does a lot of contracts training as well. I also personally do training with my team, and we have almost 700 people at our company, but obviously not everyone is sending NDAs, but I really focused on, in order to get adoption, I personally spent time meeting with different groups and departments and individuals as they were hired over the last, year and a half since we officially rolled it out, and really spending that time and explaining it. I put together a deck that what was our why. And once I was able to get those results on the NDA, then it gave me that next step footing to say, okay, let's try the cloud. And then it took a little bit more time. That one is way more complicated, obviously, but then now we're moving towards the PSA. So it's been a really exciting evolution and journey. Sometimes it's being patient. It's also being realistic too, that it's not going to work in all the cases. So if you present it as this is going to solve every single contract problem we've ever had, but if you approach it as that, what if it improves? We started real small and we were able to exceed those numbers. Like, what if 10% agree to it? Okay, if you can exceed those numbers and set reasonable goals, just like we all have to talk about in other contexts, is set reasonable goals and expectations so that then you can exceed them and be super excited when you're able to share, wow, I look at how many we've done in this period, and this is just the beginning.
Awesome, Stacey. Yeah, almost just narrow this to you guys. But it's 90% open rates on the invites and 95% of the NDAs are going through in one pass. Overall, I will just share with everybody the platform, when we look at the top line numbers, 90% of invites get opened and 75% of all deals close across all the agreements. So it does work, but you do have to get there. The way to be successful with Bonterms is to say, we're going to find areas where we can improve how we're contracting now, start using this as an alternative. I always tell people, if you're using it in a revenue motion, use it when, if you're a vendor, use it when the customer is insisting to go on their own paper. So you now have a fallback, okay, which is instead of going on their paper. Share your best practices internally and then just try it. This is what we tell everybody. Success cures the doubts. There's no way for me to tell you in advance this is going to work for you until you try it for yourself. Then you see it work for yourself, then you don't need me to tell you. So that's always the best. Okay, let's talk about external buy-in. So we like to talk about bond terms. And one of the things we always like to clarify is you're offering to meet the party on bond terms. The agreement is neutral, it's in the middle. And one of the things I think people struggle with is this notion that they're adopting something and now trying to get somebody else to adopt it. Whereas the way we like to think of it is, no, it exists. It's a great solution for both parties, and it's just inviting the other party to meet you there. How do you communicate cover notes? And Stacey, I'll come back to you in a second on this one. You've been very successful. We, on the Bonterms website, also have explainers. So if you want to explain to your counterparty why you're using bond terms, these are explainers are available for you to download and use. You can rewrite them yourself if you probably do a better job in your own words, but we give you at least a place to start. And we have those for all of the agreements. So these are all techniques to help invite the other side to meet you on bond terms. And then I'll just make two more points and bring the guests back in. Be flexible in terms of, especially from the platform, we'll show you the platform in a second. Sometimes we have scenarios where the recipient wants to do the deal on the standard agreement, but prefers to download the cover page and redline the cover page itself. So just be flexible with them. It's still a win. You're going to get them on the standard. And then we're here to help. We publish standards through this amazing 110 lawyer committee, and we provide a software platform. So we are available to help either and both sides. And people reach out to us all the time. So very often, somebody will send a standard agreement of bond terms to somebody, and that recipient will come to us with questions, and we will support them. Obviously not about the specifics of that transaction, but in general about how to use them. Okay, Arna, let's come back to you. In terms of your use of the bond term standards through the platform, are you having to do much explaining outside of the message window that you use to send it out? What does that process look like for you guys?
Much, much less than I had personally expected. That was the biggest, I would say, concern we had is people just see something new and they don't know what it is. And on the other side, and you'd have to spend more time explaining what bond terms is and that it's safe and that it's then actually you would save time and then eventually you would just say, okay, I'll just send you a Word doc with an NDA with our logo on it. The number of times where you send out the NDA and then the next morning you wake up and it's been signed, to me has been very surprising, which I think cover notes and explainers really help. And when I dug a little deeper into the why, I think there's a couple of reasons. If you think about the kind of the kind of parties you usually contract with, there's probably very large corporations who will just have their own set of contracts and not be interested in either your template or any other template than their own. Then there will be companies that are where you are, that are interested in this and open to the idea of learning about bond terms or will already know about something like bond terms. And then sometimes you have some back and forth about the specific terms, what governing law, etc. But the platform enables you to do that. But also what I've found is when you are contracting in things like procurement with very small companies or even contractors, they are actually much more comfortable using bond terms than using your paper because they can see, okay, so I'm not talking to a vendor, but I'm actually using a crowdsourced balanced contracts. And they are signing up to these things faster than you can send them out, which is just a huge time saver because usually the bond terms contract is better than their contract, because if you're a 2 or 3 person company, then their contracts are usually quite messy and it takes you a lot of time because you need to redline it. So instead you just send them yours through bond terms, but you explain, we expect you to sign ours, but it's actually not ours, it's bond terms, it's something we use. And I'm like, okay, that's great. That sounds like it will protect my interest as well as yours.
And Arna,
sorry, go ahead.
No,
that's it.
I want to say something about large companies because, and while I do this, Stacey, I'm going to bring up a cover note that's like the note you use, and we'll come to you in 1 second. But I want to say something about this because we have information that sometimes we can't publicly share, but I will tell you this. We already have our first large public company on the platform. We're about to start a POC with another. We hear from the very biggest companies who are interested in these standards. The perception is that the very large companies, as you said, Arna, will not move off their paper. I think the vendors experience that because for a company that's going to do 1,000 of these transactions, so these large companies will do 1,000 transactions on just this set of contracts that we cover, these IT contracts in a year, it's almost impossible for them to read every vendor's different terms of service. However, if they have a really excellent agreement that they don't have to update. So to come back to something else you said, Arna, just the fact that Bonterms is written by a committee of experts, that we update these, we just pushed all new playbooks, we'll push a new version of all the agreements later this year. That gives them comfort that they can rely on this type of contracting and not have to have that battle with each individual vendor. I mentioned that we're in the Atlassian marketplace. It's their standard agreement. There is a standard contract in the AWS marketplace. It's been adopted by a huge number of their vendors, and there's hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue at least that must flow through those contracts. This type of contracting will work with very large customers, but very large companies. But as you were just mentioning, it also works with really small companies, right? Who don't have their own templates and really prefer to meet the other side in the neutral place. It allows each party to say to the other at the beginning of the transaction, I am not going to enforce my market leverage on you to get better legal terms if you will meet me on this standard and make it fast and easy for me to get this done. And with that, Stacey, let me hand it back to you because you're a real expert at this. And I think you've traveled a path from where you had a much bigger way of explaining it maybe to where you are now. So if you talk about both those things, and then I did promise a demo, so Patrick's going to hop in and show the platform in a minute.
Yeah, I modified originally the Bonterms explainer on the website in our kind of in our company voice. And we were sending it out and we did a lot of training, as I mentioned, with the team. But I said, you've got to start early when you're on the phone with either a potential client or a potential vendor, whoever you're on the phone with, before you get to that, okay, let me send you my contract. You've got to say, look, I've got a better way to do this. We can do the old way, but our legal team has found a better way that will not only start our relationship off on the right foot, but it will also improve our entire relationship because everything starts with the NDA. Ultimately, if you're going to move forward with a definitive agreement like a cloud agreement or a PSA, if they have agreed to meet you on bond terms and negotiate from the fair and balanced starting point, they're going to not only hopefully be more likely to do that for the definitive agreement, but then as your relationship goes on, because this isn't just a one-time deal, right? You want to work with vendors that show us that they are going to be good partners, that they're not just going to say everything we want to hear during the sales presentation and then drop us later and say, oh, sorry, that wasn't covered. We want people that want to work with us and want to improve the contracting experience and not just say, oh, you have to use our form. It's just that dreaded battle of the forms. It just starts your relationship off on such a bad note that it's so easily changed because you can still negotiate the bond terms agreements. It's really just explaining to them that this is not the end point. This is the starting point. You can add terms, delete. We can still negotiate, but let's focus on the things that matter versus spending months going back and forth because you don't want to improve the contracting process.
One is that if you're in a purchasing motion using bond terms, we recommend, as you do, you introduce it right at the beginning and you tell the vendor, this is an option for you. I have my 30, 50, or 80-page agreement I can send you, but I can also do it on bond terms, but let me know now if this is a path you're going to take so I know which pile to put you into in terms of how we're going to get you done, because every vendor is going to tell you they're going to prioritize you and make this easy and fast for you. So now as a buyer, this gives you an option to really test them on that, right? And let them, and I know you've had a good success with the SaaS agreement. We had a fun event. We were at an event and a vendor walked by and showed us that they had a Bonterms NDA on their phone. And it turned out it had been from Stacey. And then that deal ended up getting done on the Bonterms SaaS agreement, the cloud terms. The second thing I want to emphasize, whether you're buying or selling, is if you start with the NDA, you've already introduced the other party to Bonterms and the Bonterms system in a much lower stakes way. So then when you want to send them the SaaS agreement or the PSA or the DPA, they know what this system is all about. All right, Patrick Mullen, head of operation at Bonterms. I promised a demo. We're going to do a really fast demo because we've got an eye on the clock here. We're just going to show you what it looks like to use the Bonterms platform itself to send out a Bonterms agreement, and how easy it is for your recipient to engage with you and to get the deal done. So let's welcome in Patrick. And Patrick, can everyone see Patrick's screen? Patrick, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Hello, everyone.
All right, so we are going to show you a demo company called Sassly. They're going to send out an NDA. What you're looking at is the Bonterms platform. There are a couple different ways the rep at Sassly can send out the NDA. So they can just start in their Salesforce opportunity for this prospective customer. They're going to send this NDA to a company called InsureCo. So they can just hit a button in their Salesforce that will send out the NDA. But if they're working from within the Bonterms platform, they're going to use the new deal button to send it out. We're just going to show you the experience of the recipient receiving this and negotiating. So the rep is going to choose the pre-sales NDA. They're going to type in 3 fields of data, the name of their counterparty, the name of the individual this is going to, their email address. They're going to add a CC because their buyer over at InsureCo said, copy my legal on everything that you send. Our legal needs to look at this. And they're going to take a moment to customize the message. There's a preset message that their team has set for all their templates, but maybe in this case, they know the individual on the other side and want to mention to them, hey, this is the NDA I mentioned was coming. They can send this out via magic link, meaning using their own corporate email, but the vast majority of sends on Bonterms happen using the Bonterms send system, where you just hit the button and Bonterms sends the email out. We run in GCP, the emails go out in Twilio. So here you see the recipient of Renee at InsureCo receiving the invite to come onto the Bonterms platform. They're going to open that email. They're going to see the logo of the sending company, the picture of the individual who sent it, that their email address and that personalized message. They're going to see the invite unit itself, and beneath it, they're going to see a little bit of mouse text, which turns out to be really important because that's us, Bonterms, telling that recipient they're protected by our privacy policy and security measures, and they do not need to create an account with us in order to do this deal on Bonterms. In fact, they will never be prompted to create an account with us. They are here as the guest of the sender. 90% of the time, they're going to click into that unit. What they're going to see on the right is going to be the Bonterms standard agreement. So this is the NDA, but if this were the PSA or the SaaS agreement, that's what they'd see. They can expand it, they can download it, they can search it. Log data tells us that on the Bonterms platform, this is a 5-minute experience for recipients to full completion. If they happen to open on their phone, it's a 3-minute experience. For the more complicated agreements, the log data will show that they're going to search terms like refund or termination or indemnity. For the NDA, they're also going to notice that they're going to sign a cover page. So we've been talking about the cover pages. So on the Bonterms system, these are dynamically created and updated as you go. But instead of having the parties operate directly on that cover page, instead they're going to operate on buttons because buttons are faster than text. So the recipient of this deal, Renee at InsureCo, is simply going to work her way down these key terms. The center column there you see on the left, all those values, of course, have been set and proposed by the sender, by Sassly's legal department. They're just going to start working their way down. When they hit the first one where they may have a difference of opinion, Sassly has proposed 12 months. And by the way, the vast majority of NDAs get done at a 12-month term. But here our recipient wants a shorter term. They're going to hit the change button. So the first magic element of Bonterms is the standard you saw on the right. That's doing most of the work. The second magical feature is what you're looking at right now. It's called auto accept alternatives. This gives the recipient the ability to choose from fallback positions selected by the sender. So Sassly, our sender, the Bonterms customer, can live with anywhere from 6 to 24 months. InsureCo, the recipient's going to choose 6 months. That's automatically accepted, and off you go. Confidentiality period works the same way. Our sender likes 3 years. Our recipient likes 5. Our sender knows the 5's also popular, so they've given that option. You set the options. You don't have to use any, but psychologically, it helps if you give some options because this tends to keep the negotiation within the fallbacks. If our recipient isn't happy with 3 or 5 years, we as Bonterms structure different options for them. And if and only if none of the structured options work, they go into free text. But here they're going to choose 5 years and be done. Last thing, governing law in courts, and this is crazy because if you look at NDAs negotiated at scale, simply the mismatch on governing law in courts is enough to trigger a back and forth. And those back and forths, as we all know, are very expensive. So at this point, what you're going to see is that there's basically a trifecta of states, California, Delaware, and New York, that tend to be the most popular. In any event, each party tends to have a list, and you're just looking for the overlapping jurisdiction. Here, the overlap's New York. That's going to be accepted by the recipient. And we're going to see the same thing on courts. The data we use to inform the playbooks and everything I'm telling you about comes from our committee or other standards users who share that information with us for this purpose. But the platform obviously is privacy secured, and the activity is kept between the parties. And importantly, the activity you're seeing now as the recipient is operating is only visible to the recipient. Until they save their work and share it, the sender cannot see what they're doing. So this is not a shared Google Doc. This is a turn-based system that's secure and private. Last step, what we call additional terms. The sender wants a feedback clause. The recipient can, if they're not happy with that feedback clause, they can reject it or they can edit it. This is the one place you'll see redlining on the Bonterms platform. This allows the recipient to make that work for them. We also give a playbook as well to the recipient. So all the playbooks we just showed you that are publicly available are also available here, and they can drag and drop their own changes. We're going to go ahead and send this back. Again, 95% of NDAs, there is no back and forth. It all happens just within those auto accept alternatives. When this now goes back to our sender, I'm going to show you how lawyers interact with this and solve the problem of the role of the rep versus the role of the lawyer. So this came back to the sales rep, if that's the way our customers set it up. But the rep's going to see that decisions now have to be made. Good news, all those key terms are done. But what do you do about this redlining? If the person operating this, and this is up to our customer to set this up, they can have this all come back to legal, which we see frequently. So if this is coming back to legal, there's an internal playbook that can be used for that contract negotiator or professional, and you can leave guidance within your system. You have an internal playbook where you curate your own additional terms, and you can leave guidance to your team. Like, it's okay to accept the standard playbook affiliates clause, which you'll see. But either way, if the person reviewing this needs an SME, needs help, they hit the deal team button, and this is going to let them bring in a lawyer from either within their organization, their ALSP, or their law firm. By the way, if you're on this webinar and you're a law firm and an ALSP, we do not charge you to work in your client's accounts. And you can move back and forth between any client that gives you permission to be in your instance. But here they'll bring in that expert. That expert will decide what to do about that change and leave that for the deal owner. So they're going to go ahead and accept this based on the guidance they got. And now this deal is done. And now it will go to an optional approval step on the side of the sender, where you can see a nice capsule summary of everything that happened. And the reviewer, if there's going to be an approver, can look through there. And then the last step is signature. And Stacey, I'm going to bring you back in because you're using a feature now that we just launched. So previously, once this got done, it went to signature through emails. So we return you to your own e-sign, whether that's DocuSign or Dropbox Sign or Adobe Sign. But now if the recipient is ready to sign in one continuous flow, this goes to signature. And by the way, I want to mention what you're seeing now is we're asking the recipient to fill in their signature block information. We do not collect this data from them until they've agreed to everything. But if the signer is the person who's been working in the platform, they can now go directly to signature in one continuous flow without leaving the platform. And Stacey, I know you've started experimenting with this. So any thoughts on how it's working for you?
Oh, I love it so much. And my team was so excited. So thank you to you both and your team, because it was something that, even though the whole bond terms process had cut down time on NDAs, I was still spending time, even when there was, as Todd mentioned, the majority of them were running through approval. I still had to go into our legal department DocuSign account, send it out, make some changes. And it was just, we were losing some people because some of the other parties were thinking, I thought that I already signed it. I agreed to the terms. Your team was amazing in terms of taking our feedback and then making the changes in the system. So now, instead that it's all gets captured in that one event. And it's been so helpful for not only me as legal, that I'm not even involved in these. I just get the fully signed version once it's done, but really for the experience on both sides. So our signers come in whenever. Everyone can sign at the same time. There's no signing order challenges. For those of you who manage that process in DocuSign, it really will save time on a process that already was saving time.
Awesome. And thank you, Stacey. Thrilled to deliver that feature for you and for everybody on the platform. What you're looking at now and Arna, I just would love you to come in and give any thoughts on using the platform. And then I know there's a lot of questions, so we'll try and answer a few in the time we have left. But any thoughts on using the platform and how it's worked for you?
Yeah, sure. The interesting thing is that at first you get into using the platform quite a bit because you need to set it up. And then if you are successful, you use it less and less because all you're doing is sending out your template. And then, like you said, in NDAs, 95% of the time, the next message you get is, hey, it's signed, which is just great. And let's say the incremental improvements in the user interface and user experience in the platform have been substantial in the time that we've been on the platform. Everything from what's on the screen, but also what happens behind the scenes. So that is, I think, another advantage is that you guys are very quick to respond to feature requests or possible improvements. And I found the redlining, I've never really had another party say, I don't understand this redlining. It doesn't work. It doesn't, because we're all used to seeing this in Word or in some other feature. So I found that really to work with other parties without really ever having to go into much detail on how to explain it.
Thank you both. And Patrick, I just want to show what we've been showing is negotiation history. So you can see all the changes in all your agreements. It's very easy to set the platform up. And Patrick, maybe let's just show a little bit of template builder, which is how templates are set up, and also the integrations page so everyone can see how easy it is to do their integrations. Everything in Bonterms is organized first at the level of entity blocks, then at the level of templates, and you can have templates, entity blocks for each of your different entities globally or your subsidiaries, then at the level of templates for each of our deal types. If you look at the PSA, you might have a template you're using when you're buying or a different one when you're selling. At the level of the playbook then, which is where you have both our standard playbooks and your own curated internal playbooks and guidance, and you can assign your users within your organization, whether they're in sales, procurement, or legal, internal or external, the permissions you want. What we see in the typical deployment is a ratio of about 3 or 4 lawyers to about 50 or 60 business people. I'd like to take a few questions in the moments that we have left here. And I don't know, Shai, if you want to read those out or if I should fish through the chat here, which is the best, do you think?
Yeah, you can fish through the chat. Patrick has been doing a great job of answering the questions as well. Patrick, maybe if you want to be the moderator and go through the questions, and Patrick had answered a number of questions before if he wants to repeat so other people can listen, but I think Patrick would be perfect for that.
Absolutely. Let me scroll through some of the chat and get to the ones that I have not answered. Let's go with the first one.
I saw, let me answer a few just that I saw. So one is, does the committee work on the playbooks? The answer is yes. The committee is amazing. It's an all-volunteer committee, and they help us with everything we do, from the agreements to the playbooks to really everything. So they are involved with that. I would also add that we regularly receive feedback on how the agreements are being used. That's how we improve the playbooks. This year, we will likely 2.0 all the agreements on lessons learned, but they've held up incredibly well in the last few years, to be honest with you, especially at the scale they're being read and reviewed. One of the nice things about the Bonterms system is you're working off templates that have come from decades of use and are publicly posted now and are publicly scrutinized. There are a lot of lawyers and business professionals looking at these every day. Patrick, did you have a next question?
Sure. There was a question that I think you'll like, Todd. Is Bonterms Platform akin to a CLM?
It's really not. So we think of CLM as one-sided infrastructure that you put into your organization to help you draft, move along a contract, get it approved, get it signed, and store it. We think of Bonterms as a place you go, much more like DocuSign to accomplish. DocuSign is where you sign. Bonterms is where you come to agreement. It's very lightweight to get set up. The technical implementation of Bonterms can be done in minutes in terms of connecting to your other systems. You obviously need to set up your playbooks and your templates, but unlike a typical CLM where you're spending a lot of time uploading your existing templates, the agreements are already there, of course. And we have different tools, including AI tools to help make it very easy for you to compare your existing agreements to the Bonterms system and set up those additional terms. We're really not a CLM. We're here to accomplish one task, help you get that next NDA, SaaS agreement, or professional services agreement done way more quickly with less animosity in a standardized way. That's what Bonterms does. And I should also mention, virtually every one of our users has one or more CLMs as well. Yeah, did you want to talk about your SharePoint integration?
Yeah, just as I mentioned in my response, so I built our CLM using the Microsoft 365 tools that we already had, and Patrick and the amazing team helped me build, become a expert in Power Automate, which is the AI process automation built into Microsoft 365, and Patrick was amazing and helped me work through that. As Todd mentioned, they will work with you on the implementation of this. And so now, as soon as the emails come out, they automatically get added to our tracker. And I know they're still working on some other future integrations, but we already have that initial piece built. And then I have a CLM, a separate piece to that component. So happy to discuss. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I love chatting about Bonterms and CLM. I speak on this topic in other contexts, so always reach out to me and I'm happy to help.
Arna, any last thoughts?
Also, it's easy to align your use of bond terms with what you're usually asked to do in the business, which is metrics, right? So it's always a struggle for legal to present metrics, but with bond terms, you can say, look, we move this many of our NDAs onto a standardized platform, thereby shaving off so much time, being so much more efficient. It gives you a metric that you can present to the business. And the last thing is there will be that joyful moment when you get an inbound bond term. So somebody else sends you their cover note. I use this thing called bond terms. Don't be afraid. It's actually quite okay. Please sign our bond terms.
Yeah.
And then a little bottle of champagne should pop up because you're both already on bond terms. So that should be one of your next features where it's just you're both already here. Contract problem solved. You're all done.
I'm going to let that be the perfect last word. Thank you very much for everybody who joined us. Shai, wonderful work as always for being out there and what you do. And yeah, everyone, we have these open source standards. You're free to download them and use them. We will support you with that. We have this beautiful platform and we're happy to show you that. Always feel free to reach out to us. hello@bonterms.com. Thanks for taking the time with us today. Thanks again for our guests, and we'll see you all soon.